Coming up on Theater Talk.
It's not just the theater. Everything else is collapsing around it, too. People are being slashed on papers all across the country.
And no bailout.
Theater Talk is made possible in part by the CUNY TV Foundation.
Mike Kuchwara was the drama critic for the Associated Press for 25 years. He was with the AP 40 years. He died at the too early age of 63 this year. He was a great friend of ours and a frequent guest here on Theater Talk.
For many years.
Always giving us his opinions about all the shows and the Broadway musicals that he loves so much. So we would like to remember our friend Mike tonight with some clips of his appearances on Theater Talk.
It is a holiday tradition here at Theater Talk for us to assemble some of our favorite critics. This year has been particularly...
What a gallery!
But this year has been particularly ghastly for more reasons than the shows we have seen.
I don't know why these gentlemen are laughing, because their jobs are disappearing as we speak. We're going to talk about the problems facing drama criticism in the country, the problems facing newspapers, and I think we'll eventually get to some of the shows that have been on the boards this season with Mike Kuchwara from the Associated Press. Mike, welcome back to Theater Talk.
Thank you.
Jacques Lesourd, formerly of Gannett Newspapers, now of CBS Radio, with that face always, I thought, for radio, Jacques.
Well, aren't you a darling?
And our friend John Halpern from the New York Observer. Gentlemen, welcome to Theater Talk. All right, Jacques, you spent 35 years as the drama critic for Gannett Newspapers, and you were laid off just this past year, along with, I think, 2,000 or 3,000 other reporters from Gannett. The Star-Ledger has gotten rid of its drama critic. The Sun newspaper in New York has closed down. We know that many other drama critics across the country, indeed, are worried about their jobs. Is your profession doomed?
Doomed, I would say. It's not getting a buyout from the federal government. That's clearly not one of the most missed professions. But I think, yes, I think it's sort of, certainly the drama critics circle is shrinking fast. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I think it's sort of a luxury. I mean, Gannett were very complimentary when I left. They said they love me and I'm terrific and they can't replace me and they'd never replace me and I'm irreplaceable, but they can't afford me. That's the bottom line. Mm-hmm. So I think it's sort of like the arts in the schools, and you know, it's one of those things that you can chop when you're looking for places to chop, and that's one of them.
Yeah. Are critics necessary, John? I mean, you would think if I were a producer and I'd see you critics are falling by the wayside, say, I've hated critics my whole career. You beat up on my shows. I can go now on the internet. There are chat rooms full of dime store critics all the time, yakking away on stuff. I can bypass critics by going to direct mail to my audiences to get people in. Are you no longer the gatekeepers?
We are the gatekeepers, really. First of all, what happened to you is a disgrace. It's disgraceful that they don't support the theatre when you live in New York, which is $1 billion industry. New York is the theatre. Yeah. So not to want a critic of distinction to comment on what that people should see and why. People forget that critics support playwrights. They support shows as well as critique them. Mm-hmm. So yes, they're very, very necessary. Of course they are.
You know, I think also critics, there's a shrinking of critics who are generalist news people. That's disappearing now. Everybody's on a little
theater geek.
Yeah, and I think the critics tend to be that, with the possible exception of Mike Kuchwara, whose empire grows.
Well, I was going to say, now sitting to your right is a drama critic who everyone, Mike, on Broadway tells me your power is increasing day by day because working for the Associated Press, when these papers lay off their drama critics, they're going to be using Mike Kuchwara reviews. Your empire is going to stretch across the land.
Well, the mainstream critic has totally disappeared. I mean, the days of Time Magazine, Newsweek, all having critics, where a playwright could appear on Broadway and the next week you'd be on the cover of Time. Last year, if Time Magazine was smart, they would have put Tracy Letts on the cover of Time.
They're in enough trouble circulation as it is, Mike.
That's true. That's true. But those days are gone, and now we have a niche audience. You go to the chat rooms, you go to the blogs, and this is a very specialized crowd that gets into minutia about the theater that most people don't care about.
The thing I always thought, though, John, about critics, I mean, I enjoyed reading when I was growing up, people like Frank Rich or Clive Barnes. Even if you weren't seeing the show, you enjoyed the writing. I mean, it seems to me the most important criterion for the job of a critic is to be an engaging and enjoyable writer. Do you think value is not placed on writing in newspapers anymore?
Well, my newspaper places incredible value on my writing, naturally, and lots of people who read me do. So you can only hope that you appeal to a section of the reading public who want to be entertained by you and want to be informed by you and want to be fired up by you. The critic is the man who shouts the news to the street. See the show. By and large, he has a bias in favor. Not a bias against.
But you write, John, for an elitist newspaper, a newspaper for intelligent people, but Jacques wrote for a more like a regional newspaper or of a national chain where they're more interested in replacing you with blurbs on shopping. For the large public who really don't read discerningly, they read paragraphs and look at the pictures,
Well,
and
but
that's
you're
the way it is.
just leaving out the audience that does read about the theater.
I know, but alas, they are shrinking.
Well, Mike,
But also, reading habits have changed.
Yes.
Now,
Reading
you
habits
explain-
have changed. People read news now on their BlackBerry, on their
And is
Trio.
it not true at the
Shorter and
EP
shorter.
that
Shorter.
you're how long are your reviews now?
We're writing about 500 words.
And when you began writing, you could write how many words?
750.
750, 800 if you wanted. But,
Right.
you know, people, there's so much competition for attention. The whole news business has changed. Remember when newspapers used to have various editions?
Yes.
They used to wait up for the final of the Times or the Post or the Mirror to get the review.
I
Now
think
You
so.
have to
they'll
think
write
when you
online.
read your reviews, John Hopper, and you really have
You
to
have to
think.
think?
Yes.
I wouldn't go that
And
far.
I mean, people on their Blackberries, are they thinking or they're multitasking and just
No,
getting
they're-
little
they're-
tips?
Well, I don't, frankly, see everyone reading theatre reviews on their Blackberries. I don't see everybody walking around going, my goodness me.
I better rush to
No,
the
but
box
they're
office and
reading-
buy
You
tickets.
know, I don't see that
point is-
happening.
But that's what the advertisers want to sell.
yes.
Millions and millions of people go to the theatre. The idea that theatre is dying is ridiculous. It's one of the most successful industries in America, Broadway. It's $1 billion industry, right? You can't go off Broadway and walk in. I find the off-Broadway, you never go, Jacques, to off-Broadway. but for those of us who do go to off-Broadway, they're full.
Well, I
But
think
John, when
like
you look
to
at
go.
the grosses, of Broadway, the things that are doing well are the tourist shows, Jersey Boys, Wicked, the Disney shows, things that were
For whom
kind of
critics are immaterial.
critic-proof.
Well, they're not entirely immaterial, but they are the obvious cases because it's a tourist magnet, of course, and a bordello when it comes to taste. So why are we fooling
high-priced
around?
bordello.
It's what it is, and it's now facing a potential crisis, and the fact that the tourists won't be around for the next foreseeable
That's
future,
right.
for the next year or two.
But I think
so they have to reorganize their industry too.
Right.
Yeah.
They can't sit back and charge everyone $125 to go see a family musical. It's ridiculous. It always was ridiculous, but if the marketplace can take it, fine.
Well, the
good luck
marketplace
to
has
them.
been taking it for a long time, but it is about to change. I agree with you. Mike, here's the problem that I see for the theater as critics become less important, and as indeed they disappear. It's one thing, you know, if you have a big advertising budget, you can advertise at Jersey Boys, but without a lively critical fraternity, if you will, is it possible to draw attention to a playwright who will become, let us say, the next David Mamet, the next Edward Albee? Isn't one of your functions as a critic to find that out-of-the-way play and tell the world this is the arrival of something new and exciting?
That's true. I mean, you know, we can all champion, you know, the great undiscovered playwright, but producers have to be savvy in terms of, you know, putting these plays on.
John, if you make the case that the theater is important, it's important to culture, and therefore critics are important to the theater, what do editors say to you guys? They don't want long reviews anymore. They don't want you to review that obscure thing. They only want you to review Shrek. What is their thinking? Where is that coming from?
Celebrity. That's the new buzzword.
Jeremy Piven in Speed the Plow.
Speed the Plow. And, you know, when you get a Katie Holmes, you get a Daniel Radcliffe. I mean, this is what people want to read.
Do you see us getting to the point where newspapers, media outlets are going to say, you know what, we don't really need the review to cover Daniel Radcliffe opening Equus. We'll send the reporter to get quotes from him on the red carpet, and that'll be our coverage of the opening night.
Yes. Yeah.
That
that's
you think
the
is happening?
concern.
Yes.
Well,
it is.
You'll be delighted.
yes and no. Why would they do that? The fact of the matter is there are still enlightened newspaper owners. There are still enlightened editors. And they take a major entertainment industry and a cultural industry at that extremely seriously. Why would they let down their readers? Newspapers still have, or used to, Jacques,
have readers?
Well, you know, I mean,
a bond with their readers.
You have a very
bond.
altruistic view, John.
My editor sees the need for theater reviews, but it's just a matter of a menu, and you know, it's a luxury beat. It's some, or as they call it, a legacy beat.
I don't
think it's a luxury beat at all. I think going to the theatres is an expensive thing for people to do. Very expensive, even if we were lucky enough that they did the right thing and brought the prices down, so it would still be expensive. It's not a movie. So they need critics, they need real guidance on what a show is about, what they might want to see, what they should see. They need it, and they want it, because they're doling out $200 for two.
Well, and you know, in my case,
Not a luxury.
I would guess they would think, well, you know, there is still a luxury layer of audience that cares about the theater. They'll read the New York Times, and they don't care. So they're not that big a loss to my sort of newspaper. They'll just read a different newspaper.
Or, the case may be, the Associated Press.
Well, we forget. I mean, there's a whole economic meltdown happening. It's not just the theater. Everything else is collapsing around it, too.
Really? I didn't know. We never went beyond Broadway.
So it's everything. Newspapers are folding like crazy. Yesterday, the Rocky Mountain News in Denver was put up for sale. People are being slashed on papers all across the country.
And no bailout.
And it's not just theater. It's the sports department. It's
across the board cuts.
Across the boards. The business department. So it's not just theater. Movie critics are going too. Yeah. So it's more of a worldwide phenomenon.
Thank you so much for coming on Theater Talk. Mike Kuchwara from the Associated Press, whose reviews will be seen in every newspaper across.
The thing grows. It's Kuchwara.
There's one drama critic, Mike Kuchwara of the AP.
I'm a drug addict. I'm addicted to drugs, pills, especially downers. You see these little blue babies? These are my best friends, and they never let me down. You try to get them away from me, and I'll eat you alive. Give me those. I'll eat you alive, girls.
Well, we've entered a new decade, but just before we leave the old one, let's look back at some of the most important shows, good or bad, and how they influenced the Broadway and theatrical scene in New York. And we're joined tonight by three people in the know, as always. Michael Musto from The Village Voice, Jesse Green from New York Magazine, and Patrick Pacheco from New York One On Stage and the Los Angeles Times. Welcome.
Thank you.
All right, Michael, looking back 10 years in the theater in New York, what was, to your mind, the most important theatrical event?
To me, the most exciting show was August Osage County, the only 3-hour show that really kicked ass. Okay, the biggest trends to me were Disney shows, which kind of kept coming with decreasing success.
Yes.
Like, they were flops.
Yeah, that's the word I was looking for. Also, jukebox musicals, which came in all varieties, whether they pigeonholed different songs into a plot, like Mamma Mia, or they were used to tell the story of a real group, like Jersey Boys. And that's never going to go away.
That's with us forever,
Yeah.
Jesse?
And also the scale down trend. As the decade fizzled out, everything became about either big names or just two folding chairs, or in the case of Steady Rain, big names in two folding chairs.
That's right. Jesse, your sort of highlights or lowlights, if you will?
In terms of trends, following on what Michael was saying, another version of that is the 90-minute no intermission play seems to have taken over as an important cultural touchstone. Despite August Osage County, I don't think you're going to see a lot of 13-person, three-story set 3-hour shows going forward, because most of the shows that did make it did so by costing very little, as you said. And I think also we've seen, on Broadway anyway, the continuation of a trend that started earlier, but is now really established, that a lot of what comes in and is good has come from off-Broadway or from the regional theaters. There's a lot less new production going on from just a producer going out there and finding a property.
Many playwrights are complaining that they can't even write plays that have more than 4 characters because no theater will pick it up.
Let alone bring it to Broadway.
Let alone bring it to Broadway.
Yeah. And Patrick, looking back for that decade,
well, I
you
think
can remember
what we saw was stars coming to Broadway in increasing numbers. Stars always came to Broadway to some extent. What was new about this is that younger stars did. There used to be a trend where the Elizabeth Taylors, when their film careers were sort of over with, would then come to Broadway and star in The Little Foxes. Now you had everybody from Nicole Kidman to Scarlett Johansson, to Denzel Washington, Jeremy Piven, famously, coming because it was a mark on their resume, and it was peer pressure to some extent. Their peers were doing it, so they decided to do it. It was with disastrous results.
Who was the worst? Who was the worst?
I think the worst was Kelsey Grammer, because nobody wanted to see Kelsey Grammer as Macbeth.
They want to see him as George.
Yes, absolutely. I think that, yes, I think, and also timing too. You know, in television you're a star, but the stars of Seinfeld now probably couldn't sell tickets.
Well, as long as we're on worst things, can we talk about a couple of the worst plays and musicals of the decade?
Yes, that drove the whole industry into the ditch.
Well, they were so bad that they couldn't even do that. I sat here at home, I was thinking, what is really impressing me about the 2000s in the theater? And I kept thinking of the play Primate. I don't know if you remember the anthropologist masturbating an ape show.
Yes, I remember.
How could you forget? How could you forget? They should have used that on the poster, and I think they would have sold a lot more.
I would say, just to add to what happened, I think we began the decade with the producers, Matthew Broderick and Nathan Lane, and the very first thing that they did when they were opening night, they raised the top ticket price to $100, which was a breakthrough at the time, and then immediately they tacked on premium price seats, $450 or $480 to sit. Remember, it used to be only 2 rows? And in the last 10 years, we've seen the 2 rows expand from about row C to row X, and everything's $250, $300. And if you want an orchestra seat for $120, you're going to be in row Z behind a pillar. So, now that may be coming to an end because the economy got shaky, and you see premiums maybe sort of scaling again. But that was a real big explosion in ticket pricing.
And decent orchestra seats are thus only accessible to those crooked people who drove this economy into the ground. Only those to get those bonuses to buy.
I think what you have when you have the virtue of hindsight of 10 years is that whatever trend develops, it always ends up biting you in the ass. Primate was brought in on the basis of a New York Times review. Bruce Weber saw it in, and other shows have been brought in on the basis of a New York Times review, and you live by the Times and you die by the Times.
And the Times itself is now dying.
Producers was an enormous hit. They could do, premium pricing when Young Frankenstein came in. All these ticket brokers just scarfed up these tickets and got burned on them as well. So what you do have is, and Mamma Mia was this huge, so everybody said jukebox musicals, and a lot of producers were burned on the likes of Good Vibrations and all these other things. So watch it. You know, whenever you're following a trend.
Right. Now you bring up the death of the Times so jokingly, but certainly a major
trend was the way we covered this industry, and the rise, of course, of the internet and the decline of the influence of newspaper criticism and newspaper writing, reporting about the theater.
Well, the thing is, we have to wait till press previews before we can officially write. I do anyway. I don't know about you. Until we can write about the show and evaluate it. Online, they could actually get into dress rehearsals. And tell you everything that's wrong with the show. So by the time it's even beginning previews, the whole industry knows what needs to be fixed, what's good about it, and how the show is going to fare.
Well, they know what a bunch of questionably educated online posters think is wrong with it.
Old media snobbery right here.
Well,
as opposed to questionably educated critics.
Exactly. No, but seriously, I mean, okay, but at least with critics, they have a track record. You can say, I don't go with what that critic says, so I know I don't believe that critic. But you know, you read something online and you go to see the show, and actually,
But those
very
people
good.
have a reputation too. I know that Jesse 21 is usually on target, and S'more might not be.
But there's no question that gossip columnists, Michael, you had an impact on how critics approach a show. Critics have often referred to the buzz.
Thank you for
in
bringing
their
me up,
reviews.
because I was going to say one of the big trends and one of the most influential things that happened in the last decade was the rise of my column.
But let's talk
twice a
about
week
good things.
in the New York Post. In all honesty, I know it's all a joke, but in all honesty, I do think that I did push things in a way that hadn't been pushed before. I went to see shows much earlier than reporters had gone before. I went to see shows out of town.
And is
I
that
championed
ethical?
things out of town, and I dumped on things out of town. And critics do respond now in their reviews to gossip. And there was a time when they would never respond to what was said about a show before.
And there didn't used to really be theater, Broadway gossip covered in mainstream publications that much. You really introduced that in a big way. I think when Raul Esparza had the big fight with Rosie on the set of Taboo, that became headline news, and suddenly the whole world cared about a Broadway show. They didn't buy tickets, but they cared about the show and what was going
But
on.
now,
Jesse, do
could
you want to say
argue-
something about my impact?
I was hoping you would just pass over me
No, I
quietly.
have something to say on the subject.
I have nothing to say.
But one could argue that you having sources in these rehearsals telling about these arguments is damaging the process and may damage the ultimate product.
And Michael, you do play a little loose with the facts from time to time.
This started as a tribute segment. What happened?
It's an intervention.
Thank you very much.
Now it's a
Joining
Friars
us on
roast.
Theater Talk. We'll see you next time. Good night. That's the
But
last
shouldn't we
time.
say something about some of the highlight productions of the 10 years?
Yes.
Lion King.
It was in the 90s.
That was in the 90s.
Okay, never mind.
There are none.
All right, so what Mamma Mia hath wrought. I mean, Michael, we saw it in Toronto.
I loved
right?
it. You hated it. I loved it.
I didn't like it in
I
Toronto,
didn't
right?
like it,
But we
but I
saw
love-
it, never thinking, we certainly didn't think that it was going to be the phenomenon that it was. And not only was it a phenomenon, but I think it also was made into a pretty bad movie that grossed $500 million globally. And I don't think you can underestimate, certainly, film musical and the impact that Chicago the Film Musical and Nine, Mamma Mia, has had in terms of bringing attention to the Broadway musical in general.
And Broadway names.
But going
And
back,
Broadway names.
people pay to have an experience on Broadway. I mean, that was what live theater is about. And Mamma Mia, you could cut 20 of those 21 songs, but you stay for that mix that's so exciting that people go again and again just to have that uplifting experience.
Who are these people?
I don't know. I didn't-
Middle-aged lady.
No, I didn't.
Weird.
I consider Mamma Mia to be immoral, so let's not even go there.
Goody Haskins. Goody Haskins.
But what I did like was Jersey Boys, where you're having a great experience being there at that live
What one
show
did you
with
like
the
the most in the last 10 years?
For me, Caroline or Change was the most moving thing I saw in the theater in the last
The
10 years.
dishwasher sang.
No, that was
Did it.
Beauty and the Beast. I have to go with Hairspray because it was an old-fashioned show, but it delivered. It was the new Bye Bye Birdie,
I
and
agree
it turned
with
out to be
Hairspray,
better
too.
than Bye Bye Birdie.
I just want to say one performance, which I don't think I'll ever be able to forget, was Vanessa Redgrave
Yeah.
in Long Day's Journey into Night
Yes.
with Brian
I had that
Denny.
on my list, too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was a really, you were really seeing a great theatrical artist at the top of her game, and
Yeah.
arguably the greatest American play.
It's so hard for me to do it up properly now. I can never find my glasses. My eyes are getting so bad.
Your hair's all right, Mama. I was only thinking how well you look. That's just what I've been telling you.
I'll never forget, because it really gives you some insight into how a great actress like Vanessa Redgrave works. Brian Dennehy was in the play, had done it in Chicago at the Goodman Theater. And he thought, easy, I got it down. Got the lines down, I got the character down. And he said, from the first day of rehearsal with Vanessa, I knew I would have to throw everything out that I knew and start all over again, because her performance was so vibrant, so difficult at first, because she was feeling her way, that he knew he had to go with her. And it was a very difficult rehearsal period, but the results were among the most exciting things I've ever seen on stage.
In a musical vein, Patti LuPone in Gypsy was in 3 decades of seeing theater, or maybe more. It was the most exciting performance I had ever seen. And I would ditto Jesse on Caroline or Change as well. The disappointment of the decade was that Stephen Sondheim did not have a hit
good point. Yeah.
during the decade.
Well, he spent the entire 10 years working on Bounce.
Well, I hope that we'll see it in this decade. I really hope that we'll see a great Sondheim musical, because when you see revivals of his shows, they are peerless. And when you see a little night music, the idea of craft and whatever shortcomings this revival may have, when you see Hugh Wheeler's book married to his songs, wow.
Oh, it's wonderful. It's wonderful.
All right, so we got to wrap it up, but something that you wish to see in the next decade. Stephen Sondheim with a new show.
Stephen Sondheim success, commercial and critical.
All right,
something we're looking forward to.
Well, I'd like to see Primate again.
Okay, there you are.
You know, a performance I really loved was Hugh Jackman in The Boy from Oz. Not a great musical, but again, I'm going to compare him to Vanessa Redgrave, to have an artist, who's really up there interacting with the audience and so great. It's a very special thing, and we don't see enough of it on Broadway anymore. Mm-hmm. Michael Musto?
I thought you were going to skip me.
No, we were expecting you to come up with one. We gave you time.
You had a minute.
I'm terrible at predicting.
All right.
I said
no,
Madonna.
Just something you'd like to see.
Something I'd like to see.
Yeah.
How about an original musical that's not a jukebox musical, that's not based on an old TV show?
Fair enough.
With Patti LuPone.
Fair enough. I would only say, going back, I would love to see one last show from Tommy Tune, because we really have lost that wonderful director-choreographer era that Tune came out of, with Bob Fosse and Jerome Robbins and Michael Bennett. Tune was the last of them, and he's been absent throughout the past decade, and I think his absence really is felt. I'd love to see one more great Tommy Tune show.
Mm. And he did way better with 9 than they did in the movie version.
No question about it. So, all right, thanks, guys. We'll have you back 10 years from now. Jesse Creed from New York Magazine, Michael Musto from The Village Voice.
Knife on the left.
Fork in the back.
No,
close enough.
What's the book called?
Fork on the left, knife in the back.
All right, and Patrick Pacheco from New York One on Stage and the Los Angeles Times. Thanks.
Waking Sleeping Beauty.
Your movie coming out about the Disney Wars in the animation department in the 1980s.
Which we saw and thought was
a great movie, terrific movie.
Thank you.
You'll be great, I can tell. Just you wait. That lucky star I talk about is there. Honey, everything's coming up. Roses and daffodils. Everything's coming up. Sunshine and Santa Claus. Everything's gonna be bright lights and lollipops. Everything's coming up. Roses for me.
You can sign up for viewer updates at theatertalk.org.
Or you can Twitter us. Our thanks to the Friends of Theater Talk for their significant contribution to this production.
Theater Talk is made possible in part by the Frederick Lowe Foundation, the Eleanor Naylor Dana Charitable Trust, the Alan S. Gordon Foundation, the CORY and Bob Donnelly Charitable Fund, Carrie J. Fries, the Dorothy STRELSIN Foundation, the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, and the New York State Council on the Arts, a state agency.
We welcome your questions or comments for Theater Talk. Thank you and good night.